Have you ever loved someone the world told you to hate? Imagine standing at the edge of everything you've ever known, torn between the blood that raised you and the heart that chose you. Clara Whitmore, daughter of the most feared rancher in Deadwood Crossing, was taught that the Apache were her sworn enemies. Yet, when her path crossed Kanoa, the warrior her father vowed to destroy, nothing remained simple. She was his prisoner, or was she? He could have let her die, but he saved her. She could have run, yet her heart stayed. Two souls caught in a war older than themselves, bound by a love that defied every law written in blood. If it were you, would you follow loyalty to your family or risk everything for the chance of love? Could you abandon the world you came from to build another in the ashes? This is not just a tale of passion and danger. It is a story of choosing who you are when the world demands you be someone else. Stay with us, because the journey of Clara and Kanoa will make you question what you would sacrifice for love. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss these timeless stories. He had asked for nothing but peace, yet all he found was fire. The riders had torched Red Hawk Village, leaving behind only ashes and silence. Kanoa stood with nothing left but the woman his people said he should never have touched, Clara Whitmore. Their bond was outlawed, their future was unthinkable, but in the ruins, truth burned brighter than fear. Do not touch me like that. Her voice trembled, a whisper frayed at the edges. It was not fear of him, but of the storm inside her own chest. Yet she didn't step away. She stayed still, heart hammering, as though her father's rules carved into her since childhood had suddenly lost their hold. Kanoa's hand lingered near her cheek, weathered and scarred from years of struggle, but he didn't close the distance. Firelight danced over his face, revealing the marks of battles survived. But his eyes, they were not the eyes of a savage, as she had always been told. They searched hers, not with rage, but with something far more dangerous, a hunger she could not name. Clara Whitmore, daughter of Silas Whitmore, had been raised to hate men like him. Her father, the most feared rancher along the Rio Grande, had built his fortune with barbed wire and blood. He never forgave the raid that had taken his brother's life. He had sworn to erase the Red Hawk people if it was the last thing he did, and now his daughter stood in their camp, face to face with the man she was taught to despise. Yet hatred refused to come. Red Hawk Village was quiet that night, embers glowing low as desert wind whispered through the ashen plains. Kanoa had taken her carriage on the Dustwind Trail and brought her here, a prisoner, or so she thought. Yet no threat had been spoken. No hand had risen against her. Not until now. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice steadier than before. Kanoa studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Because you think you know this land, but you do not." He let his hand fall and stepped back. "And because you do not fear me." "Not truly." Clara swallowed hard. "I fear what this is doing to me." He tilted his head, a shadow crossing his face. "Then you are wiser than most." That night, while the camp grew still and the drums died down to fading coals, Clara slipped out of her tent. Her heartbeat raced as she padded barefoot across the cool sand toward the horses. Freedom was just a few steps away. She reached for the reins of a dark stallion, but a voice broke the silence. "I could have ended you hours ago." She froze, blood like ice. Kanoa stepped from behind a mesquite tree, moonlight tracing the harsh lines of his jaw. A bow rested across his shoulder, in his hand. Her scarf, the one she had dropped near the fire. "I am not your prisoner," she said, trying to sound unshaken. He held up the scarf. "Then why do you run as though you are—" Her eyes darted toward the path, but it was too far. No hope of escape. "I don't belong here," she whispered. Kanoa's voice was calm, low. "You walked into our land, yet you never asked why we guard it like breath itself, why we fight for what little we still have." She could not answer. Her throat closed around words she did not know how to speak. He dropped the scarf into her hands, not harshly, but gently, and turned his back on her. No threat, no demand, only silence. The ashen plains stretched silver beneath the moon, endless and unforgiving. Clara sat stiff in the saddle as they slipped into the night. Kanoa riding ahead, his body moving like one with his horse. He glanced back at her now and then, but spoke little. He didn't need to. The weight between them said enough. What began as captivity no longer felt that way. It was something harder to name something that felt like choice. When dawn broke over the ridges, painting the land in shades of rust and violet, Kanoa stopped. "We rest here." Clara slid from her horse, her legs unsteady. She stumbled, but his hand caught her wrist, steadying her. For a breath too long, they were close, too close. His eyes were tired, haunted, but beautiful. "Why are we running?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Scanning the horizon, he finally said, "They will come for you. They will think I took you for ransom. And did you?" His face stayed unreadable. "No. If I had left you there, you would already be dead." Her throat tightened. "They will think I betrayed them. They think I am one of you now." She looked down at her torn dress, at the dirt streaking her skin. Maybe she was. Maybe she was no longer anyone's daughter at all. Later, hidden among the rocks, they built a fire. Kanoa hunted a hare with his bow, and she helped him clean it. The smell of roasting meat filled the air. "You are not what I expected," she admitted at last. He gave a faint smile. "And what did you expect? A savage, a monster. That is what my father always told me." Kanoa's gaze met hers, sharp but calm. "And do you still believe him?" Clara hesitated, then shook her head. "No, not anymore." The night was quiet, except for the steady crackle of the fire they had built among the rocks. Smoke drifted lazily upward into the endless dark, and the stars looked so sharp they could cut. Clara sat wrapped in a rough blanket, the cold air biting into her skin. She had expected silence to feel suffocating, but beside Kanoa it felt shared, almost gentle, as if the unspoken words between them were safer than speech. When the flames dropped to embers, he spread blankets across the hard ground. She lay down stiffly, shivering as the desert's chill stole what warmth remained. She turned toward him in the shadows, her voice fragile. "Where are we going?" His answer came low and certain. "To a place they cannot find us." She waited for more, but he stopped there. After a long pause, he added, almost reluctantly, "Perhaps I do not know." The honesty hit her harder than a lie ever could. She wanted to ask what would become of her, of him, of them together in this wild expanse, but the questions weighed too heavy on her tongue. Sleep came in restless bursts, broken by dreams of fire and galloping horses, and of her father's voice bellowing her name across the plains. The next sound that wrenched her awake was not thunder. It was hooves, many of them. Kanoa was already crouched near the mouth of the rocks, his bow drawn, his body taut and alert. His hand flicked for her to stay low. "Scouts," he whispered. Her chest tightened as they crept up to the ridge. From that perch she saw 6 riders cutting across the ashen plains, rifles slung on their backs, dust rising behind their horses. She knew the lead rider instantly. Hank Doyle, her father's trusted foreman. Her stomach turned cold. "They are tracking us," she whispered, her voice breaking. Kanoa's face hardened. "Then we move. Now." They smothered the embers of their fire, gathered what little they had, and mounted quickly. The sky had only begun to pale when they pressed their horses into a punishing pace. Clara's body screamed with every stride, but she kept silent. She would not give him cause to see her weakness. Hours dragged, the land growing harsher with each mile. The riverbeds lay cracked and dry, cliffs jagged like broken teeth. Heat shimmered in waves until her lips split and her vision blurred. She bent low over the horse's mane, gripping tight just to stay astride. By the time the sun dipped low, they reached Iron Fang Canyon, a narrow slit of earth carved by centuries of rain. Behind a curtain of wild sage, a cave yawned black and cool. "This will serve," Kanoa said. They dismounted. Clara's legs gave out, sending her stumbling. He caught her before she fell, his arm steady beneath hers. "You should have told me you were failing," he said softly. "I am not weak." She shot back, breath ragged. His eyes locked on hers, steady, unyielding. "No, you are not." Inside, whispering hollow. The cave lived up to its name. The wind outside hushed into a soft hum, and stone walls wrapped them in stillness. They built a fire again, though smaller, and Kanoa pressed a canteen into her hands. She drank greedily, water running down her chin. "You have never traveled like this," he observed. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "I have never traveled at all. My father kept me bound to his land unless he chose otherwise." He studied her across the firelight, his features carved in shadow. "And now you sit with the man your father swore to destroy." Clara let out a bitter laugh. "The irony is not lost on me." The silence stretched again, broken only by the crack of burning wood and the wind stirring the sage. At last she asked the question that had haunted her since he first spared her life. "Why are you helping me?" He did not look at her, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Because you no longer belong to him." Her heart twisted. "I never did." He turned then, his voice quieter but sharper. "Then why obey him?" She faltered. "Because I thought I owed him everything. He raised me, he shielded me, he taught you to hate." Kanoa said flatly. "Yes." Her whisper was raw. "And now I hate him for it." His hand brushed hers light, accidental perhaps, but enough to make her breath catch. He leaned forward until his forehead rested against hers. The touch was fleeting, almost nothing at all, yet it carried the weight of something she could no longer deny. His voice came like a vow. "No man owns your heart but you." Clara closed her eyes, letting herself feel the warmth of his words. A branch snapped outside, boots on gravel. Voices. Kanoa's body tensed. He stamped out the fire with his boot, plunging the cave into blackness. His bow was in hand before Clara could breathe. She crawled backward, pressing herself into the stone wall as the glow of a lantern swept across the entrance. Then came the metallic click of a rifle. The shot exploded, stone shattering inches from Kanoa's head. He rolled deeper into the shadows, arrow already drawn. Footsteps clattered against rock. Searched the cave. A voice barked. She knew that voice. Hank Doyle. Kanoa's gaze found hers for a heartbeat, his finger to his lips. Silence. Two figures stormed inside, rifles raised. Kanoa moved like smoke. An arrow pierced the first man's shoulder, driving him back with a scream. The second fired blindly. The blast ricocheted off the cave wall, the sound near splitting Clara's ears. Kanoa lunged. The two crashed against stone, fists striking, boots scraping. The rifle fell, clattering across the cave floor. Kanoa shoved the man hard into the wall. Bone cracked. Then stillness, breathing heavy. He stood over the unconscious body. Clara scrambled to his side, hands trembling. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head. "We leave." They gathered their things swiftly, urgency tightening every movement. Outside, their horses stood miraculously untouched. The man Kanoa had wounded crawled through the dirt, blood trailing behind him. Kanoa knelt, stripping him of his weapon. He could have ended him, but didn't. Instead, he stared coldly into the man's terrified eyes. "Tell Silas Whitmore this," Kanoa said. "He will have to walk through fire to reach us." They mounted and rode hard into the night. By sunrise, the land shifted. Gone were the sweeping dunes of the ashen plains. Dry brush and thorny hills stretched ahead. The air cooler now, laced with the scent of mesquite and distant rain. Clara clung to the saddle, every muscle screaming, but she did not utter a word. She would not let herself appear fragile, not anymore. The sun had stripped her skin raw, each gust of wind like needles against flesh. Clara clung to her saddle with what little strength remained. Fatigue carved deep into her bones, but still she pressed forward beside Kanoa. When, at last, the land yielded to a hollow of broken stone, she saw it a crumbling adobe mission forgotten by time. Its tower leaned, roof half fallen, but the stone wall stood stubbornly against wind and years. A rusted iron cross still clung to the top, stubborn as the bones of faith long abandoned. "This is where we stop," Kanoa said. His voice carried neither relief nor weariness, only certainty. Clara slid from her horse, her knees buckling. She collapsed into the dust before she could catch herself. Strong arms lifted her Kanoa's arms. He carried her inside without a word, laying her gently across the cold altar. The stone was unyielding, yet kinder than the dirt floor. "I am fine," she whispered, though the words trembled. "No," he said firmly. "You are not." He pulled off his outer coat and spread it across her shoulders. The heavy fabric smelled of smoke and cedar. Before she could protest, he stepped outside, leaving her alone with the echo of rain beginning to tap against the broken roof. She drifted between sleep and waking. When her eyes fluttered open, Kanoa knelt beside her, a tin cup of water in one hand, a bundle of wild herbs in the other. His other arm was smeared dark with blood. "You're hurt," she gasped. "It is nothing," he muttered, pressing a strip of torn shirt to his shoulder. She pushed herself upright, dizzy but determined. Her fingers brushed his as she reached for the cloth. "Let me." Their hands touched. His warmth startled her more than the sight of blood. She pressed the fabric against the wound. Her own hands stained red. The weight of it hit her the danger he had stepped into, again and again. Not for his people this time, but for her. "This happened because of me," she whispered. His gaze softened, holding hers steady. No. This happened because your father would rather spill blood than face the truth. Tears burned behind her eyes as she tightened the bandage. He hates you. Not only you, all of you. I thought it was about land and fences, but it is not. Is it? It is fear. Kanoa said quietly. Fear, wearing the mask of pride. It rots men from within. She studied him then, not as an enemy, but as a man. The sharp planes of his face, the shadows etched by hardship, the quiet fire behind his restraint. He was shaped by violence, yet not defined by it. Beneath the scars, there was something else yearning, kindness, a hunger for peace. Why did you save me? She asked again, softer this time. He looked up at the cracked ceiling, where fading light filtered through. His reply came low, almost reluctant. Because I have lost too much already. I was not ready to lose you as well. Her heart stuttered. Neither of them spoke. The air between them thickened with everything they could not name. Night came with the storm rolling in from the west. Lightning stitched across the horizon, thunder booming through the broken walls. Rain began to fall, steady and relentless, drumming against the stone. They retreated deeper, into a back room where the roof still held. Kanoa built a fire in a stone pit, and the flames licked golden shadows across the walls. Clara sat close, shivering though not from the cold. He handed her a strip of dried venison. She held it, but did not eat. What happens now? She asked. He stared into the fire. They will not stop. Either they find us, or we vanish. And if we keep running, we become ghosts. I do not want to be a ghost. He turned, his hand finding hers careful, deliberate. You are not. You are real. Each time you speak, you remind me of that. Her throat tightened. Kanoa. His forehead lowered until it rested against hers. A question in the silence. She did not pull away. Then his lips brushed hers, tentative, searching. When she did not resist, the kiss deepened. His hand cupped her face, hers tangled in his shirt, clinging as though the world itself might break apart. When they parted, both breathed as if they had run for miles. Never, she began, nor I. He admitted, not like this. They stayed wrapped in one another, the storm outside their lullaby. Later, when the fire burned low, Clara rose to stretch. A sudden gust slammed the warped door open. She hurried to close it and found something wedged in the frame. A folded sheet of paper, weather-worn, pinned by a stone. She pulled it free. Her breath caught. It was a wanted poster. 2 names, 2 faces, hers and Kanoa's. Wanted, alive or dead. $500. She stumbled back, clutching it. When Kanoa saw her face, he rose immediately. What is it? She handed it to him. He read, jaw tightening, eyes darkening. They have branded us as outlaws, she whispered. No, he said grimly. They have branded you a traitor. His eyes lifted to hers, fierce and tender. But I know the truth. He tossed the poster into the fire. They watched in silence as their faces blackened and turned to ash. At dawn, smoke rose on the horizon. Not the pale gray of a brush fire, but black, heavy, consuming. Clara's chest clenched before he spoke. It is the village, Kanoa said bitterly. They rode hard from San Isidro Mission, pressing toward Red Hawk Village. But with every mile, the hope of sanctuary crumbled. The air turned acrid, filled with the stench of burned cloth and charred wood. Then came something worse, the sickly sweetness of death. When they reached the ridge, Clara's horse balked. She pulled the reins tight, staring in horror. Below lay ruin. The Red Hawk village was gone. Where once there had been low huts and tents nestled by the stone bluff, now only skeletons of wood remained, blackened and broken. Smoke curled upward in choking clouds. Horses wandered aimlessly, wounded and terrified. Kanoa dismounted without thought, staggering forward as if struck. Clara followed, her stomach twisting. Bodies. She saw them everywhere. A woman sprawled in the ashes, arms curled around something small. A child. The two burned together, inseparable even in death. Clara's breath came ragged. Her hand reached for Kanoa's shoulder, but he had already fallen to his knees. His fingers dug into the dirt, his body trembling with a grief that hollowed the air itself. She knelt beside him, her palm against his back. The muscles beneath her hand were tight as wire, trembling with rage and sorrow. "They did this because of me," she whispered. His voice rasped. "No, they did this because of me." Her tears spilled then, not for herself, but for him, for the people burned with their homes, for the children silenced by hatred carried down generations. From the charred edges of the village, survivors began to emerge. A boy with a torn cheek, an old woman leaning on a crooked stick. Each face carried shock and ruin, yet also endurance. Kanoa rose to meet them, but his eyes were darker now, hardened by the weight of what had been lost. Clara had never seen death so close, so merciless. Not even the grim tales her father spun of raids and skirmishes had prepared her for this. She reached toward Kanoa, but he was already on his knees in the ash, staring at the blackened skeleton of what had once been a home. At his feet lay the charred remains of a child's toy arrow, untouched by fire, yet surrounded by ruin. It had belonged to his younger brother. Her hand trembled as she placed it on his back. His body quivered beneath her touch, muscles tight as a bowstring. His hands dug into the earth, as if he could anchor himself against the tide of grief. "They did this because of me," she whispered. His voice was raw, a rasp dragged from deep within. "No, they did this because of me." Tears burned Clara's cheeks, falling not only for herself, but for him, for his people, for all who had been consumed by the hatred her father had fed like a wildfire. Out of the scorched edges of Red Hawk Village, survivors began to emerge. A boy with a torn cheek, eyes hollow and wide, an old woman leaning on a cane fashioned from crooked wood. They carried grief in silence, walking among the ruins of everything they had known. Kanoa rose to greet them, though the warmth in his eyes had hardened. He stood tall, giving respect, but the burden on his shoulders had grown heavier than the sky. Soon the elders gathered, their voices low and solemn, speaking in words Clara could not understand. She didn't need translation. Their eyes told the truth when they glanced at her. She was not welcome. Kanoa spoke with them, standing in the circle of ash and memory. His jaw was set, his gaze unflinching. But when he turned back to Clara, his face was taut with unspoken weight. "They blame me," he said. "Because you brought me," she answered softly. He didn't deny it. "I should go," Clara whispered. "No," he said, but his voice faltered. "They are right, Kanoa. My father did this because of me, because of us. I made the choice," he replied. They did not. That night, the survivors lit a fire in the center of what remained. A council formed. The elders sat in a circle on the ground, their faces lined by grief and anger. Warriors young and old ringed them, shoulders stiff with sorrow. Each survivor spoke what they had witnessed, whom they had lost, what they feared would come next. Clara sat in the shadows, away from the fire's glow, every word falling sharp on her heart. An elder raised his voice, accusing Kanoa of abandoning the old ways. Another declared that love was a luxury the dead could not afford. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Clara could feel the resentment as keenly as a blade pressed to her skin. She did not belong. Kanoa stood before them, tall, unyielding. "I did what I did because I will not become what they demand of us," he said, his voice carrying through the night. "I would not trade her life for a peace we never truly had." A younger warrior, his face streaked with soot, stepped forward. "And now we bury children in the dirt because of your mercy." Kanoa did not look away. "Then I will bury them. I will carry them. I will carry this guilt all my days, but I will not abandon her." Clara pressed her hands to her face, shame burning hotter than the flames. She had thought her presence a small burden, but now she saw it for what it was, a wedge driven deep into a people already bleeding. When the council ended and the survivors drifted back into what shelters remained, Kanoa sought her out. "You're not safe here," he said. "I know," she admitted. "They want revenge. Do you?" she asked, her voice hollow. He hesitated, then sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. "I want justice," he said, "but I no longer know if there is a difference." Her eyes searched his. "What will you do?" He looked to the dark sky. "They gave me a choice." She already knew it. Stay and lead his people in vengeance, or leave everything behind with her. His silence was its own answer. Later, when the village lay in uneasy stillness, Clara stood alone at the dry riverbed. Stars shimmered faintly in the thin water pooled in its cracks. She dipped her fingers in, watching ripples spread outward. "I thought you would be gone." Kanoa's voice came from behind her, quiet, almost weary. She turned. "I almost was." He stepped beside her, his gaze on the stars. "I keep wondering what my brother would have said. He was only a boy, but he had more fire than any of us. He dreamed of peace, of growing crops instead of carrying a bow." Clara blinked against the sting in her eyes. "Maybe I should have stayed, taught him to fight." Kanoa shook his head. "No, you gave him hope instead." She looked at him, her voice unsteady. "And me, what did you give me?" He met her gaze. "You made me see what I had been blind to my whole life. You gave me a reason to choose," she whispered. "What do you choose now?" Her voice cracked, but her answer was certain. "You." Kanoa reached for her hand. His touch was steady, grounding. But before relief could flood her, a sound tore through the night, a rifle's crack. She turned just in time to see a flash from the ridge. Pain seared her shoulder, and she stumbled. Kanoa caught her before she struck the ground. Clara gasped, clutching at the spreading warmth beneath her collarbone, her vision spinning. Kanoa lifted her in his arms, shouting words she couldn't understand. Panic surged around them, feet pounding, voices shouting, and then she saw him. Silas Whitmore stood on the ridge, rifle still smoking, his face carved with fury, lit by moonlight. His voice thundered across the canyon. "You stole her from me." Kanoa said nothing. He only looked down at Clara, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with a fury she had never seen before. "Hang him!" Silas roared to his men swarming behind him. "Bring her back alive." Clara clung to Kanoa's shirt, her voice faint, breaking. "Do not let him win." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Never. The world dissolved in chaos, hooves pounding, drums of war rising, warriors crying their last vows. Then darkness claimed her. At dawn, Kanoa was dragged into Deadwood Crossing, chains biting into his wrists, dried blood streaking down his face. Dust rose around his feet as townsfolk gathered in grim silence, their eyes full of judgment. No one spoke, not Sheriff Coleman, not even Silas Whitmore, who rode at the front. A cruel grin cutting across his face. Kanoa's head remained high, his spine unbent. They could bruise his flesh, chain his hands, but they could not break the truth within him. He had carried Clara across 2 ridges before the wound slowed him. He had hidden her near the old well outside the ruins, whispering for her to stay still, promising he would return. Whether he could keep that promise, he did not know. Now the doors of Coldstone Jail slammed shut, and darkness swallowed him whole. Kanoa wasn't sure he could keep his promise to Clara. Behind the bars of Coldstone Jail, the stink of mildew, rusted iron, and dried blood pressed in around him like old ghosts. Chains rattled as they locked him against the wall, tethering him like a beast waiting for slaughter. Outside, Silas Whitmore's bark carried through the streets. He wanted a hanging. At sunrise, for her sake, Silas said loudly, ensuring Kanoa could hear. "I'll make it quick." Kanoa didn't answer. He only stared through the bars at the townsfolk gathering in the square, their boots caked in dust, their eyes alive with a fear he knew well. He had seen it on battlefields, in burning villages, in the faces of men who killed without ever understanding what they hated. Closing his eyes, he saw Clara as she had been the night before, her face pale, trembling, whispering with all her strength, "Don't let him win." Her blood had stained his hands, her heart had beat against his chest, and he knew he could not let that be their final moment. Not like this. The sun bled slowly across the horizon, orange and violet painting the rooftops of Deadwood Crossing. The town settled into uneasy quiet, broken only by laughter spilling from the Silver Spur Saloon and the heavy tread of boots on the boardwalk outside. In the jailhouse, time felt frozen. Then he heard it. Footsteps, soft and quick, not the heavy stride of guards. His eyes lifted. She was there, Clara, her hair tangled, her dress torn and streaked with dirt, her face pale yet blazing with defiance. She held a lantern in one hand and a stolen key in the other. They said nothing. Their eyes carried every word unsaid. She hurried to the door, fumbling with the lock. "You should not be here," Kanoa murmured. Her voice trembled but was fierce. "You should not be in chains." The lock clicked. She slipped inside and dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands found the shackles on his wrists. She winced at the sight of the bruises, the dried blood. "They were going to kill you," she whispered. "They still will," he said evenly. Her jaw set hard. "Not if I burn this town to the ground. Even then, even beaten and bound." He smiled faintly. "You are still fire," he asked softly. "Are you hurt? I have been better," she admitted. Her hand hovered at the bandage on her shoulder, the wound still fresh but bound with the cloth he had tied days before. "They said you were dead," he said. "I heard the same about you." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a vial and a strip of iron. He didn't ask how she had come by them. He knew better than to doubt her resourcefulness. Together they moved with quiet urgency. The jail door swung open into the night, the town slumbering around them. The gallows already stood in Hangman Square, rope swaying gently in the night breeze. Sheriff Coleman snored in his office. 2 guards slept slumped in rocking chairs outside the saloon. They slipped through the shadows, ducking behind wagons and barrels. Clara led him to the stables. Their horses waited, his still saddled and dust-streaked, hers stained dark with dried blood on the horn. "Can you ride?" she whispered. "I have to." Before she could mount, the sound came low, steady, rhythmic. Drums, war drums, rolling from the ridge to the north. They froze. Torches appeared in the dark, bobbing like fireflies, multiplying until the horizon burned with light. Then came the cries. Dozens of Red Hawk warriors surged toward Deadwood Crossing. "You told them not to come," Clara said in shock. "I didn't," Kanoa replied grimly. "But they came anyway." The battle ignited all at once. Torches flew, shattering against rooftops. Flames clawed upward. Gunfire cracked through the streets. Horses screamed and reared. Townsfolk scattered, dragging children into homes, slamming doors against the chaos. Sheriff Coleman stumbled half-dressed from his office, too drunk to make sense of what he saw. On the saloon porch, Silas Whitmore appeared, rifle in hand, his fury scorching hotter than the fire climbing the buildings. There he bellowed, spotting them. He raised his weapon. Clara fired first. The shot went wide, but close enough that Silas ducked. It gave them a moment. They ran. Bullets tore the air. Warriors on horseback stormed the streets, knocking over barrels, driving townsfolk into hiding. Flames devoured rooftops. The gallows itself caught fire, rope snapping in the heat. Kanoa fought his way forward, arrows flying swift and deadly from his bow. Clara moved beside him like a shadow, fast, fearless, her pistol barking in sharp bursts. They reached the square as fire climbed the flagpole. Smoke filled the air, glowing orange against the dark sky. On the church steps, Silas Whitmore stood tall, his rifle aimed straight at Kanoa. "Step away from my daughter," he roared. Clara stepped forward, her voice rising loud enough for the whole town to hear. "I am not yours." His eyes went cold. "You always were." He pulled the trigger. A single shot rang out, but it wasn't his. Kanoa had already loosed his arrow. The bullet never left Silas's gun. Instead, Kanoa's shaft struck true, burying deep in Silas's chest. The rancher staggered, disbelief freezing his face. The rifle slipped from his grip. His body followed, tumbling down the church steps with a hollow thud. For one heartbeat, silence ruled. Then the flames roared higher. The townsfolk broke, retreated. The warriors slowed, pulling back, no one firing another shot. The fight was finished. Kanoa dropped to one knee, not from wounds, but from the weight of it what had ended, and what it had cost. Clara stood frozen, hands trembling, her heart racing. She had seen her father fall, and she had not stopped it. There was no triumph in her veins, only a strange quiet, the freedom she had prayed for, yet one purchased at a price she could hardly bear. Later, when the flames smoldered to embers and stars returned overhead, they stood before the charred remains of the gallows. Ash drifted in the air, glowing faint against the night. Clara looked at Kanoa, her eyes filled with unspoken truths. What now, she asked. He turned toward her. "We leave, far from here, far from them. We begin again." She nodded, but before she mounted, she looked back once, at Deadwood Crossing, at the ashes of her old life. "Goodbye," she whispered. Then they rode, not in flight, not in fear. This time they rode toward beginning. The wind swept across the open plains, whispering through tall grass. It carried the scent of rain, the ghost of smoke, and the faintest breath of peace. The sky stretched endless, pale and vast, as though the world had cracked open, new. Morning came. Clara stirred, waking to golden light warming her face. Her head rested against Kanoa's chest, his steady heartbeat the only rhythm she trusted anymore. His arm lay around her, protective even in sleep, as though nightmares might still try to find them, but they hadn't. Not yet. The morning came soft and golden, spilling light over the ridges and across the cabin Kanoa and Clara had pieced together with their own hands. Clara stirred before him, careful not to wake him, and let her gaze sweep over the place they now called home. The cabin was rough walls with gaps, a roof patched with bark, but it stood firm against the wind. Beyond stretched a small patch of field, dark soil tilled and waiting, and behind, the stream hummed steady, a song of life promising new beginnings. For the first time, Clara realized she belonged nowhere and everywhere all at once. The ranch, Deadwood Crossing, her father's world. It all felt like shadows behind her. Here with Kanoa, she felt home. He stirred beside her, instinctively reaching for her before his eyes opened. When he finally looked at her, a smile eased the hard lines of his face. "You did not sleep," he said. "I did," she answered with a faint smile. "Enough." He pushed his hair back, still tangled from sleep. "Bad dreams. Not dreams. Memories," she whispered. He nodded knowingly. "Those are harder to wake from." They stood outside together, watching the sun climb over the distant hills. Silence bound them. Not heavy, but shared, the kind that made words unnecessary. Later, Kanoa walked to the stream to wash his face. When he returned, he held a tiny flower in his calloused hand, its pale purple petals trembling in the morning air. Clara let out a soft laugh when he tucked it behind her ear. "Where did you find this?" she asked. "On the hill," he said simply. "They bloom for only a short while, brief lives, but they burn bright." She touched it gently. "I like it. I knew you would." The day unfolded slowly, as life had since they left chaos behind. He chopped wood, sweat gleaming on his brow, while she hauled water and swept the inside of the little cabin. The floor was bare but for a blanket, the walls empty save for a basket of tools and scraps. Yet the space whispered of promise, of a life waiting to be built. By noon, clouds thickened, carrying the smell of rain. They hurried to finish a few more planks for the roof. Clara gripped the hammer, driving nails into the wood while Kanoa held the board steady. She slipped, cursing softly as she struck her thumb. "You're supposed to be watching," she teased through a wince. "I was," he replied, straight-faced, "just not your thumb." She gave him a look that cracked into laughter. He joined her, and for the first time in what felt like years, they laughed not from relief or madness, but from something simple, ordinary, human. When the first drops fell, they ducked inside. Rain slid down through the gaps in the roof. "Still not a perfect roof," he muttered. "We will get there," she answered. "We built worse when we were running." He leaned back, listening to the storm. "Do you miss it, miss? What the danger, the chase, the fire of not knowing what comes next?" Her answer came quickly. "No, I don't miss being hunted. I don't miss being afraid." He was quiet, eyes on the fire. "But you miss the fire." She looked down at her hands. I miss who I was when survival was the only choice, when everything was clear. Fight, breathe, love, no room for doubt. He reached for her hand, warm and steady, and now she hesitated. Now, I don't know who I am. Not my father's daughter, not a rancher's heir, not a hostage, not an outlaw. You're just Clara, he said gently. That is enough. Tears pricked her eyes. She had thought peace would be easy, but peace left room for grief she had buried too long. I wish my mother could see me now. She whispered. She died when I was 12. My father raised me like a soldier, but she was softer. She would have understood this. Understood me, Kanoa asked. Clara nodded. He was quiet, then said, My mother died young too. I remember only her voice. She sang to us at night. Sometimes I still hear it in the wind. They sat hand in hand as the storm passed. When the clouds broke, the sky glowed bright with blue and gold. Kanoa rose, pulling her gently toward the door. Come, he said. I want to show you something. Barefoot. She followed him across damp grass, past the stream, and up the ridge behind the cabin. The climb was steep, her legs burning by the time they crested. But when her eyes swept the valley beyond, she stopped breathless. Rolling hills stretched wide, green and wild. Clusters of trees painted the earth with color. Deer grazed in the distance, and birds darted across the sky. It's beautiful, she whispered. This, Kanoa said, crouching to press his hand into the soil, is where I will plant. This land knows no hate. It remembers no wars or laws. It only remembers what we give it. And what will we give it? She asked softly. Life, he said simply, hand in hand. They walked back down as the sun dipped low. That night, they roasted scraps of food over a small fire outside the cabin. Wrapped in blankets, they lay beneath the stars. Clara rested her head on his shoulder. Do you think they will ever forgive us? She asked. Who the tribe, the town, the world? Kanoa was silent a long moment, watching the flames. They do not have to. We chose each other. That is enough. She closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of fire and the distant howl of a coyote. For the first time, they were simply two hearts, no longer fugitives or enemies, but survivors who had built something fragile and precious from the ash. Sometimes the fiercest battles were not fought with rifles or arrows, but with the courage to hold on to love in a world ruled by hate. Kanoa and Clara had defied blood, land, and legacy to stay together, and in the end, it was not revenge that triumphed, but the stubborn strength of love refusing to die. What would you give up for love? Would you risk your name, your place, even your life? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story moved you, stay a while. Another tale of passion and peril waits for you right here on the screen. Life often places us at crossroads where duty and heart clash. The story of Clara and Kanoa reminds us that love is not about convenience or approval, it is about courage. Clara grew up under the shadow of hate, taught to fear what was different. Kanoa carried the burden of loss, hardened by a world that sought to erase his people. Yet, when their lives intertwined, they discovered something stronger than fear, the choice to see each other not as enemies, but as human. For those of us who have lived many seasons, this truth rings clear. The world may try to define us by family, by legacy, by old wounds, but our hearts still have the power to choose. Forgiveness, understanding, and love are not the weak paths. they are the brave ones. And while our battles may no longer be fought on horseback or with rifles, we all know the wars of pride, resentment, and silence. The lesson is simple yet profound. No one can own your heart but you. And sometimes, the greatest act of defiance is to love in a world that teaches hate. Thank you for spending your time with us and walking alongside Clara and Kanoa's journey. If their story touched your heart, please give this video a like, share it with someone who believes in love's strength, and subscribe to our channel. Together, let's keep these timeless stories alive and remind the world that love always finds a way.